Hi, everybody. Welcome to your first lecture in AP Biology. Today we are going to be talking about animal behavior, which is in your book from chapter 36.7. We are going to try and read some of that in class next time we meet. So your homework today will be to watch this video and take notes as you go. I'm going to write notes on the screen as we go through these slides and videos. Feel free to take notes on those. And then when we get back into class, we'll do some discussion questions around the lecture and talk about what was in there. Make sure everybody can make sense of the information in this video and slideshow. So we'll start with animal behavior, and we'll start by observing some animal behavior. Here we go.
Female fiddler crabs are better balanced than males, and cause quite a stir whenever they venture among the boys. This frantic waving is all about catching the eye of a passing lady. The faster the rhythm, the better the chance of being noticed and outdoing the competition.
Excellent. All right, so as we think about that first behavior, we're going to just start by defining what animal behavior is. One of the benefits of having our lecture videos online like this is that you can pause and stop whenever you'd like to, take some notes. So if you'd like to write some of this down, this would be a good way to start taking notes and remembering what we're talking about in this video. Animal behavior is really just defined as an organism's response to some kind of stimulus. We can break up this, or we can ask questions about the behavior that certain organisms are performing by breaking up those questions into two generic areas. The first is going to be proximate questions, and proximate questions are asked to determine how an organism is exhibiting a certain kind of behavior. When we think about the fiddler crab from the video a second ago, we're going to note that the fiddler crab sees a sensory cue in its environment, which is a female. It starts to use its nervous system and its muscles to wave its claw around and hopefully attract the mate towards itself. The how of how an animal does a certain behavior is very mechanical. It's based on its anatomy and its sensory input and output that goes on in its body. The ultimate questions we can ask when it comes to an organism's behavior deal with why an animal does the behavior it does. As you may have been able to guess, because the fiddler crab is waving its claw around to attract a mate, it's doing that behavior in the hopes of reproducing. Basically, all ultimate questions come down to two words: survival and reproduction. Animals do the behaviors they're going to do in the hopes of surviving and reproducing. They in general fall into one of those two categories, if not both. Okay. So that's the start of where we are going to base our ecology unit on. It's animal behavior and these types of questions. When we get back in class, we'll review these again by looking at some other examples. Okay. The next thing we're going to do, oh man, I got to erase this every time. I did not know I had to erase all the words. Sorry about that. So the next behavior we're going to look at are called fixed action patterns. And basically at this point, you can divide up what we are going to learn about in this chapter into two things: innate and learned behaviors. Innate behaviors are going to be genetically hardwired into an organism's brain or into its development. Organisms do exhibit behaviors that they are not taught how to do. They're just genetically ingrained in the animal or plant. But some behaviors are learned. Okay, and those involve being exposed to some kind of stimulus in the environment. The first kinds of behaviors, again, we're going to look at here are innate behaviors. Innate behaviors. And innate behaviors, in case you didn't catch what I just said, are genetically hardwired into organisms. Genetically hardwired into organisms. Oops. Organisms. Innate behaviors don't need to be taught. The first type of innate behavior we'll talk about are fixed action patterns. Fixed action, oh, that should be an N there. Fixed action patterns. These behaviors are initiated by something called a sign stimulus. So anywhere, or if an organism were to encounter a sign stimulus that triggered a fixed action pattern, the animal or organism would do that behavior to completion. The one other last thing we should jot down here, because it is important, is that fixed action patterns must be completed if they are started. Must be completed. An organism, oops, looks like I can't write over my picture there, so I don't know how to fix that. Anyways, fixed action patterns, if they are initiated by a sign stimulus, must be completed to their end point. They can't be stopped halfway through, which is a weird, unique quality of these types of behaviors. Up here, you've got a male stickleback fish. Male sticklebacks attack other male stickleback fish. This was first studied by Nico Tinbergen, who's somewhat known as the father of animal behavior or ethology. And he noted that male sticklebacks would attack other male sticklebacks when they would get into their habitat or their area. But then he also noted that male sticklebacks would attack fire trucks as they drove by his lab. He was very curious about that behavior. And so what he ended up doing is he made a clay model of a male stickleback like this one and put it in the tank next to his other male stickleback fish. And he would make other clay models that really didn't look like fish, but were like blobby looking fish that sort of resembled a stickleback, but had this red underbelly. Male sticklebacks, by the way, as you might be able to tell in this picture, do have a red underbelly. And so what Nico Tinbergen wanted to figure out is, what are these fish attacking? Are they attacking the other fish? Or are they attacking the red sign or the red visual cue? What he ended up noting is that when this male stickleback clay model was placed in the tank, male sticklebacks didn't attack it at all. But when they were placed with these clay models and the red underbelly, they did attack the model. What does that mean? In this example, the sign stimulus is the color red, while the fixed action pattern is the attacking behavior. Okay? Here's another example of a fixed action pattern. This comes from, let's see if I can do this a little. Oh, there we go. Oh my gosh. You guys just witnessed something amazing. Okay. Another type of fixed action pattern would be this one of a mother goose tucking an egg underneath its body. Ducks and geese sit on eggs and incubate them while they are developing. However, if an egg rolls out from underneath the mom, they will scoop that egg back underneath them. And even if you take the egg away mid-action or mid-behavior, it will still complete the motion. This is kind of a grainy video, but it does exhibit what we're trying to talk about here. So let's see if I can play it. Here's the egg being taken away, and that actually is kind of premature. So here is the female rolling the egg back underneath its body because it's rolled out. Here's a scientist taking it away, and the egg is, or the bird is continuing to scoop the egg underneath itself, even though it's not there anymore. That would be a classic definition of a fixed action pattern. Okay. All right, we have other types of behavior that are innate, and these fall under the realm of communication. So when it comes to some behaviors are communicative or deal with communication. Some communication can be visual. So if we write up here visual, we make note that honeybees actually communicate to other worker bees that food is nearby. How do they do that? They do that by waggling their abdomens in a certain direction. It's actually called the waggle dance, as you can see up here. Bees that find food that is directly in line with the sun will come back to the hive and waggle straight up, as you can see in picture A. And if the food is found in the opposite direction of the sun, they'll waggle down and communicate that to their fellow worker bees. Even if the food or the nectar or whatever they found, some kind of fruit, is 30 degrees to the right of the sun, they'll come back and waggle 30 degrees to the right of straight up. Just kind of amazing. I once got lucky enough to see this behavior in one of those flat plastic beehives that you might find at a nature reserve, where bees were waggling in all these different directions, and that was communicating to them and me, because I was familiar with this behavior, where the bees were going for food, which was very cool. So that's a type of behavior. Another type of behavior dealing with communication would be something that's olfactory, or something you could smell. I'm going to write smell on here, but the technical word for that is olfaction, which is the ability to sense molecules in your environment and respond to them. Minnows will respond to pheromones produced by other minnows if they encounter danger, and they will all respond to that cue by huddling together. Animals can also respond to others' olfactory cues when it comes to mating. Some animals will spray chemicals indicating that they're ready to mate, and then animals that walk by those smells will know there's an animal or an organism in this area that's ready to mate. So those are all types of communication behaviors, and those are mostly innate. They can involve some learning, but they're mostly innate, or the trigger to have them happen is innate. Okay. Next thing we'll look at is another kind of innate behavior that actually has some learning associated with it. Let me clear the screen here. This behavior is known as imprinting. Konrad Lorenz was the first scientist who noted this behavior, imprinting. And it has an innate and a learned component. The animals or organism's ability to imprint is an innate piece. So the timing, right? We'll write that down here. The innate piece to imprinting is timing. Some birds will learn their species bird call or bird song at a certain point in their life. And that occurs because their developmental biology is ready to learn that behavior at a certain point. And that's the innate component. When they're developmentally ready and the genetics trigger them into learning behavior, they can then learn whatever is being presented to them. The learned component of this behavior is what they are learning. So whether they're imprinting on a song or a parent, that is controlled by their environment. Konrad Lorenz noted this behavior of imprinting when he took care of ducks on his own. What he ended up doing was taking some duck eggs, actually these are geese, geese eggs, and incubating them himself. As they hatched, he was the one there when they hatched, and they were looking at his face when they were born or as they hatched. They then, at that point, started imprinting behavior and imprinted on mom. Mom is the closest thing nearby, and that was Konrad Lorenz. And so after the imprinting period of time was over, you can't change the result of that behavior. And from that point on, the geese followed Konrad Lorenz around as he would walk around and take care of his farm, which is really cool. There's a Disney movie about this called Fly Away Home. It's a good Google if you get a chance to do it. Okay, we'll move on here to other types of innate behavior that have a little bit of learning associated with them. This type of behavior, which we'll just erase the top portion of this slide, is called migration. The innate component of migration is that it is instinctive in the organism to migrate. Animals have this genetic component that they need to move or migrate somewhere. But where they go is learned. So we'll write that down here. Migration. For a long time, whooping cranes, especially in North America here, were very much affected by habitat loss and hunting. So in an effort to save them, scientists started dressing up as whooping cranes, getting in these little biplanes, and if they could imprint on the whooping cranes, then the whooping cranes would follow them to the appropriate mating ground and hopefully mate. These programs have been pretty successful, and at the moment, while there were about 18 or so whooping cranes left at the bottom of their population numbers, restoration and conservation efforts have grown that population size up to 500, which is pretty cool. Amazingly, these animals have to imprint on mom, and what these scientists try to do, let me erase the screen here, what these scientists try to do is actually dress up like whooping cranes so that they don't imprint on humans, but on something that resembles a whooping crane. I'll show you this video just to show you the outfit they have to wear, because it's quite funny. Here we go.
Disguise the human form. They've been fed and taught to forage using this thing from the time they were just chicks, and they're attracted to it. You know, our headgear is white, so they don't pay attention to our head, they pay attention to this head. So who knows how they reason that out, but it works well.
The costumes even come equipped with sound effects.
This is a brood call or a crane purr, and it's, you know, it kind of says to the chick, you know, you're okay, everything's fine, I'm here, and it's calming. And
imagine being a scientist and dressing up like a whooping crane for work every day. That's fantastic. All right, moving on. Other types of behavior that have some innate and learned component to them would be spatial learning behavior. These are digger wasps that exhibit this kind of behavior. So we'll put up here spatial learning behavior. Spatial learning has some innate component in that it is triggered at a developmental stage in the animal or organism, but what they learn is based on their environment. Digger wasps perform spatial learning behavior by noting where their nest is and memorizing what kinds of environmental cues are around them. Nico Tinbergen studied this behavior as well, and he would find digger wasps that had a certain nest location and then change up what was around their nest and move it to another location, confusing the digger wasps and showing that spatial learning was occurring, right? So the innate component of this is that it is occurring at a certain developmental point, but then as the learned component of this, the learned component is what is around them in the environment and how that is affecting their placement of objects or their locating of home. All right. All right, and now we're going to get into some behaviors that are mostly just learned. Okay, I'll go over some of these now. What we have up here is a general category of learned behavior called associative learning. Okay, That just means that an organism is responding to some cue in its environment, and it is modifying its behavior as a result of that experience. Okay, you might be able to do this right now. Take a look at these sport peppers and chili peppers. You look at their color and their shape, and you may have some reaction to them right now just by looking at that shape or that color pattern. Some of you may note a terrible experience with these and something bad because you don't like chili peppers. Some of you who maybe like spicy food may see this image and associate it with a good experience or something that you like. Okay, that is all we're talking about here with associative learning. Animals or organisms in the environment that find or accomplish or perform good behaviors are rewarded, and if they are punished for a certain behavior, they're more likely to not do that again. That's again all associative learning. You can induce associative learning in the lab by doing something called conditioning. And for you AP Psych people, this is something you might have heard of before. So the first type of conditioning is known as classical conditioning. And classical conditioning occurs where a neutral stimulus is attached to some kind of behavior and response. So in Pavlov's dog's experiment, which AP Psych people will know very well, what Pavlov did was every time he fed the dog, right? So in normal practice, Pavlov would feed the dog would salivate and eat the food. He then would start ringing a bell or a tuning fork before feeding the dog. He'd ring the tuning fork, bring out the food, and the dog would eat the food and salivate. As soon as he started conditioning the dog to note that this tuning fork meant food was coming, he could tune the fork and have the dog salivate even though there was no food in front of him. So in general, this neutral stimulus is the tuning fork. And that tuning fork is then attached to another stimulus, which is food. Okay, the response to that is conditioned on the neutral stimulus to some extent. The other type of associative learning is called the other type of conditioning is called operant conditioning, where animals are rewarded or punished for certain behaviors. So here's an example of a reward, but we'll write them both down here. Animals that are rewarded or punished for certain behaviors can be operantly conditioned to do certain things. Here's a really funny video of a squirrel water skiing.
Okay, you ready? Here you go, please.
How is that squirrel able to do that? How does it not just run away terrified with all those people there? Well, what most likely occurred is that the trainer that was helping train this squirrel for this activity probably gave them a treat as they showed interest in the water skis. So if the squirrel looked at the water skis, treat. If the squirrel touched the water skis, 2 treats. If the squirrel laid on them, 5 treats. Laid on them again, 5 treats. If the squirrel touched the handlebars, 10 treats. If the squirrel touched the handlebars again, 10 treats. And eventually you give the squirrel enough treats, it learns, oh, I get unlimited treats if I just stand right here and don't move. And in doing that, you are conditioning the animal. There was another really famous scientist who did this named B.F. Skinner. He invented something called a Skinner box that would reward and punish mice for doing certain behaviors. And he could get them to respond to light and sound and motion stimuli just through learned behavior. Okay, moving on here. One last type of learned behavior that is somewhat innate, actually, is problem solving. A lot of animals have the ability to problem solve. One of the most famous and impressive examples of this is a crow. Crows can problem solve from finding food, foraging for things, and it's pretty amazing. I'll show you this video to illustrate that. So here you've got the crow. The crow's going to push down that lever and get the food. Now the crow has to figure out how to push down that lever with a plastic tube on top of it. Crow takes the rock from the environment, throws it down the tube, and initiates that latch. It's pretty amazing behavior. Other animals can do that too. All right, that leads us to our last topic for today, and that is breeding and social relationships. Those can be really informative when thinking about how animals behave in their environments. The first type of social relationship you will see is a monogamous relationship. Monogamous relationships require parents, both the male and female, to care for offspring, and monogamous species mate repeatedly every reproductive cycle. Okay, so monogamous species in general mate for life, but mate one male and one female. They don't go and find other mates. They have offspring together and they rear those offspring together. So mate one male and one female, and I'll put under here, both take care of the offspring. Both take care. Why is this important, right? Well, in certain species, taking care of offspring can require a lot of effort. That can come down to the bringing of continuous supplies of food, the defending of a certain territory, just the finding of resources in general. If offspring require a lot of resources, typically you see that species display monogamous behaviors. Humans are an excellent example of this type of behavior because human babies require a ton of care. They would most likely not succeed if they didn't have the care of both parents. Albatross display this behavior as well. Albatross have to bring a constant supply of food to offspring, and that is because they would not be successful. Those offspring would not make it without the constant supply of food from the male and the female. Because so much care is required for the offspring, they generally tend to mate together and not find other partners. Okay. The next type of mating behavior would be polygynous mating behavior. That behavior occurs when one male mates with many females. So we'll write up here, one male mates with many females. In general, this type of behavior is very common in the animal kingdom. What's most likely happening in these species is that the male is finding a store of resources, whether it's food or territory or protection, and females are attracted to that rich amount of resources. They're attracted to the resources that are available there. By being there, though, the male gets to mate or has the right to mate with those females. The male has to fiercely defend his territory because it's going to be under constant attack from other males who want the right to mate with those females. The thing with this type of behavior and why it is so why it is different from the monogamous species example is that offspring from polygynous species don't usually need as much care. Usually offspring can be fed by one parent. They can get up and walk around almost right away, if not within a few days. And in general, they can walk or run with the herd pretty quickly. Because offspring don't need as much care, the male can go off and defend the territory. They can find other mates and have more offspring and basically defend all of those offspring together, while the female is feeding and providing resources to the offspring. In general, offspring are a little more self-sufficient if they come from polygynous species. Monogamous species, like I was saying earlier, I'll go back to that slide for a second. Monogamous species, those offspring need so much care that the male and the female, usually work together to take care of the offspring. Okay, so those are our two examples of pretty much the most common mating relationships in biology. You do see one other kind of behavior when it comes to mating and polygyny. So this is polygynous relationships once again, and again we're talking about when one male mates with many females. If one male's mating with many females, you can exhibit or see something called agonistic behavior. An agonistic behavior is a threatening behavior. Threatening behavior. You see this in the elk from the previous picture. It's not on display here, but male elk will fight other male elk for the territory that they're arguing or fighting over. That's agonistic behavior. Kangaroo will perform this agonistic behavior. There's some pretty amazing videos of mountain goats ramming their heads into one another, and that is agonistic behavior. They're not trying to kill the other organism for food. They're trying to scare that organism away so that they can mate and have the territory for themselves. Okay. The last type of mating relationship we'll look at here is polyandrous species. And this, I gotta say, is quite rare in nature. You don't see a lot of it. What this amounts to is an example where a female may mate with many males. There are two classic examples of this. Honeybees are a classic example of this because there's a queen bee, and that queen bee will fertilize eggs from many different males. All of the males work and help the queen bee. Seahorses are also another amazing example of this. Female seahorses can deposit eggs in males, and then males rear the offspring and release them into the environment. What does this do? It frees up the female to go mate with other males and deposit more eggs into other males, which is a pretty interesting phenomenon. You don't see this a lot in nature, but with polyandry, this is one female mating with many males. And again, in this type of relationship, a mating relationship, the offspring have to be pretty self-sufficient. They can't provide or they can't rely on a ton of care because they won't get a ton of care. They don't have the two parents together. They only have one at best. Okay. Some offspring have no care. All right. So that brings us to our final topic, which is altruism and the genetics of behavior. And then we are done for today. The last type of behavior I wanted to point out to you is something called altruism. Typically, we think of altruistic behavior as really nice behavior. Amazingly, we see altruistic behavior in the wild, in other species besides ourselves. Altruistic behavior amounts to behavior that decreases the fitness of individuals, but it increases the fitness or survivability of the group. Okay, so we're talking about behavior that harms you but benefits the group. Ground squirrels, Belding ground squirrels, exhibit this kind of behavior as predators come by. Ground squirrels will stand up on their hind legs and call out a warning call that alerts everybody in the colony, hey, there's a predator nearby, and then they will scurry into the colony underground and hide. This obviously, though, puts the warning call person, the warning call squirrel, on center stage. The predator can see this squirrel making a call and everybody else scurrying away. So the odds of this squirrel getting harmed go up, but the fitness or the survivability of the group is helped by this one person doing that action. Amazingly, what we find is that these ground squirrels are not just doing this to be nice, okay? They're doing it to improve their ability to pass on their genes. Why is that? Well, what we see is that most ground squirrels that move away from a colony as they develop and get older are males. Males will get up, leave the colony, and go mate with other females in a different colony. That's actually a good behavior because it increases the genetic diversity of their group. You wouldn't want a lot of inbreeding in a family that ruins the genetics of the lineage. However, females tend to not leave the colony. Females tend to stay and accept the new males into their group and mate with them. So females know if they're out and about away from their colony and they see a predator, they can look around and see how many of my siblings, children are out there, and if I make this call, how many can I save right now? If there's a ton out, they may make a call in the hopes of saving their family relatives. However, because males come from a different colony, they don't know who they're related to, if anybody. And so males are a lot less likely to make these warning calls because they're not increasing their own genetic survivability. They're just helping others to be nice. And we don't usually see kinds of behaviors like that. One type of behavior that you may be familiar with, that you may be thinking of, is just something called reciprocal altruism, which means, or which refers to behavior that is nice that you hope is reciprocated back onto yourself. If you were to hold the door for somebody and let them in on your way into a grocery store or wherever, I guess we're really not going into a lot of places nowadays. But if you were to hold the door for somebody, you'd just be doing a nice behavior. You're not instinctively thinking, oh my gosh, they're my relative, I might mate with them. Let's increase our genetic survivability. You're not thinking that. You're just hoping that if you do this good deed for someone else, that those good deeds will get repaid back to you, and your the people around you will all benefit. That's reciprocal altruism. That's a little different than what we see in nature, which is just referred to as altruism. All right, our last figure for today, and this is one of garter snakes and banana slugs. One theme that you're going to see throughout this course is evolution, and how evolution is everywhere and affects the many different aspects of plants and animals in their environments. One last thing I wanted to talk about is how behavior itself is shaped by evolution. Garter snakes that live in California can actually smell banana slugs and go and locate them and find them and eat them. That ability to smell banana slugs is something that is selected for through the process of natural selection and evolution. So banana slugs that have a really good way or a really good sense of smell and can really pick up banana slugs will be able to find more banana slugs. And if they can find more, then they will have the ability to have more offspring because they have more energy, more offspring, and now their offspring will inherit this disposition to have a really good sense of smell for banana slugs. You might be able to envision a garter snake that really can't smell them that well, whose genes are affected by some random mutation, who then cannot find the banana slugs because their sense of smell isn't working right. If they can't smell the banana slugs, they can't find the food, they then can't mate, and the genes that are not really helping them find banana slugs die off in the population and decrease in their quantity, in their numbers, in their frequency. So anyways, evolution affects behavior as well. All right, everybody. That is going to do it for this behavior lecture. We're done for today. We are going to come back and regroup together and talk about questions related to this lecture discussion. And I'm going to post some questions as well as we get back to class, something that we can review together. So more on this to come. Good job watching the video and taking notes. We'll see you back in class here shortly. Bye.